You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
For an epic journey, the Extraordinary Phenomenon Investigations Council presents Epic Voyages. Come join us as we enter and experience the great mysteries of the world with tonight's host, Aaron Judkins, a.k.a. Maverick.
Welcome back to Epic Voyages Radio. This is Maverick, your host for tonight's show. We have an excellent lineup for you tonight. Sharon and Gilbert, Derek Gilbert, I'm so sorry, is our guest. But before we get to them, welcome back from the holidays and Christmas and the New Year. I hope that you had a very special holiday season with your friends and family. I know on this end it has been, as always with holidays, it goes by very fast and it's very chaotic at times. So glad to be with you in this new year, 2015. We have some great things lined up for you this year here at Epic. Make sure you go to the website at epicvoyagers.com for the latest info and guest lineup that we have there. And regarding what I've been doing here in the Valley of the Giants here in the Texas Hill Country, very exciting things are happening behind the scenes. And I'm hoping that I can reveal more information to you later, but I can tell you that we've been really working closely with some producers for a possible TV series. That is still all in discussions at this current time, and I think in the next coming months we'll know something. It's going to be very exciting. So I need you to go to aaronjudkins.com. So we can have your input and voice your opinion about what you want to see. So if you go to aaronjudkins.com, there's going to be a poll on the website, and just go to the poll and then just vote for what you would like to see regarding a new TV series. So lots of neat things are happening. I wish I could tell you more. I can't. It's really bugging me. but some really great possibilities coming down the pike for old Maverick here. Also, don't forget the film, the documentary film Finding Noah, is coming out this year. Now, we still don't have a release date, but as soon as we do, I promise that I will get that up on the website at aaronjudkins.com and all the social media outlets. So we're gonna have a really really great lineup for 2015. This movie will be, I think, released in theaters this year. Now, we did have the screening for Finding Noah in Dallas back in December for the cast and crew. And so I got to see it for the first time, kind of a rough draft of the film, if you will. It's very, very interesting. I have to say, it's kind of odd seeing yourself on the big screen. It's a little unnerving at times when you realize that, you're up there and everybody's, seeing this, this blue, rag I have on my head. It's quite funny. And you just kind of sink in your chair a little bit thinking, why did I have that on? But we are going to be pushing this film out, so we really need your input. By the way, I need you to go to facebook.com/Finding Noah. If you go to the Finding Noah website, findingnoah.com, that will be linked up on there. But we really need about 300,000 likes on Finding Noah Facebook. So if you can do that, that would be awesome, and help spread the word for us on that. Okay, so tonight is our special guest, Sharon Gilbert. And Sharon is a Christian author. She has written a number of books, one of which is Armageddon Strain and The Winds of Evil. She has contributed to nonfiction titles such as God's Ghostbusters, Pandemonium's Engine, and Blood on the Altar. You can find her websites at SharonKGilbert.com, SharonKGilbert.com, or GilbertHouse.org. Tonight we're talking about Ebola and the fourth horseman of the apocalypse. This was released back in November 2014, and this is really delves into the West African Ebola epidemic, which dominated the news cycles during the most of the summer and fall of 2014. Sharon has studied prophecy for over 50 years. She brings her background in molecular biology to bear on how Ebola might actually be mentioned in the book of Revelation. Expanding on her groundbreaking presentation at the Pike's Peak Prophecy Summit, Sharon presents her compelling case that Thanatos, the angel of death who rides the fourth horse in Revelation 6, is given permission to use biological weapons, and therein begins the hellish ride of Ebola. So her book offers an open but hopeful presentation on how Ebola emerged in 1976 and what this means for us today. So also with Sharon is her husband, and Derek. And Derek is author in his own right and has done a multitude of writing as well. So please help me welcome both Sharon and Derek.
Well, thank you very, very much, Maverick. Good grief. I didn't know you were called Maverick. Ooh, I think that's super cool.
Welcome. Thanks for having us.
Dr. Maverick. With the
thanks for being
with the blue thing on your head.
Thanks for being on the show. We have, I guess back a couple of years ago, you guys have an internet show that you do. And you had me on your show at one point, I think maybe twice, regarding some of the work that I've done. And that's when I first got familiar with your work. And I've been following that ever since. When I saw that you wrote this book on Ebola and the fourth horseman of the apocalypse, it really, really caught my attention. By the way, the cover is really awesome. I don't know who,
isn't it? Yeah,
I don't know who did that, but it's very, very well done.
Well, shout out to Daniel, who works for Defender Publishing, and he's the one who did that.
Wow,
he is cool.
Now, Derek, did you have? Were you did you co-write the book with Sharon, or did you just do all the research for her?
No, neither. This is a topic that's way above my pay grade.
No, actually, if you're wondering why he's in on the discussion, it's because, to be honest with you, I have fibromyalgia and I have to go to bed early every night. Early for me is going to bed at 7 Central Time. So the fact that this is running from 8 until 10, anytime I have a late interview, I always ask Derek to come in because he helps to keep me awake and keeps me motivated. And besides, he and I are so used to talking to each other, doing PID radio now for 10 years. He's done VFTB. He could talk all day if he had to. So I know that if I start to flag, then he's going to, I'll tag team him and he'll come flashing in.
Right.
So we can talk about anything and everything, because 2 hours is a long time to talk about an epidemic that, praise the Lord, is waning.
Yes.
And I'm happy to see it. And I hope that it continues to do so.
Let's talk a little bit about, exactly what Ebola is. Is it, I know there was a lot of news press about this. I think most people know that it's a virus. Mm-hmm. But other than that, can you tell us about how Ebola started and why it's so infectious?
Well, I can tell you, first of all, that it was discovered by Western man and named in 1976 when it broke out in what we now call Congo. It was Zaire at the time. It broke out in a very small village. There were, I can't honestly remember the number of the deaths. I think it was under 100. But it was, at that time, I think it was between 50 and 90% fatal, depending on how you got it. Because a lot of the women who died especially got it because they were actually injected with it. Now, that sounds like a conspiracy, but the truth is that they were cross-infected needles. Patient 0 came into the hospital, had Ebola. The nuns didn't know it. Patient 0 infected these needles. They only had 5 needles, period, in this little hospital. 5 needles.
And this was back in 1976?
This was back in 1976. And this was in an area where a lot of the men, and even today, a lot of the men go into the big cities to work because that's where the money is. So the women stay back in the villages and they tend the farms, they take care of the kids, and they have a lot of babies. When they're pregnant, because they are taking care of other kids and they're taking care of the farming and the home and they walk for water, they work hard. They need a lot of energy. So these women back in 76 had been in the habit of walking to the hospital, which was quite a walk, and they would stand in line. Sometimes 300 of them a day would line up for vitamin B shots, because these vitamin B shots were the cure-all. They were the miracle jab that kept these women going. And these cross-infected needles were infecting people with Ebola. And the nurses didn't know it because it was just a mystery to them. At that time, science was just learning about hemorrhagic fever viruses.
What and how did that, did it come from like another, like some kind of like a flu strain from another animal? Like we've heard about H1N1.
Yeah, well, it's a type of...
Is this cross-contaminated from another animal population?
Well, first of all, it's a filovirus. It's not an influenza virus. It's a different family of viruses. It's a very unique family of viruses that only has 3 members. It's Filoviridae is the name of the family, and it has Ebola, it has Marburg, and what's called quavivirus, which means cave virus. Quavivirus hasn't really infected many people in an outbreak, so you never hear about it. Marburg is actually worse than Ebola. So let's pray Marburg never breaks out.
Now, wait a minute. You're saying that there's something worse than Ebola?
Yeah, Marburg.
And what does that do?
It's more infectious. It's also a hemorrhagic fever virus, so you have this hallmark sign of bleeding out, which, by the way, the Ebola virus that broke out in West Africa has appeared to mutate. And so they've changed it from Ebola hemorrhagic fever virus to Ebola virus disease, because the bleeding out sign seems to be less with this outbreak. So the virus is definitely mutating. But
that's not good.
Well, it can be good if it mutates to where it's less infectious. if you kill your host, you don't get to multiply very much as a rule. But Ebola is so incredibly infectious that it managed to multiply to the point where one drop of blood could have 1 million Ebola virus particles in it.
Oh my goodness.
1 million. It only takes about 5 virus particles to infect you.
No kidding. Okay, now we're well, this is all news to me because now we have such an innocent, vitamin shots being given in 1976, and now all this thing is, Now, how come it hasn't escalated since 1976?
Oh,
and then we don't hear about it, and then all of a sudden, boom, in 2014, it's all over the place.
It's broken out about every 4 or 5 years. There's an outbreak in the Sudan area of Africa. The West Africa outbreak is brand new for that area, but about every 3, 4, 5 years, there's an outbreak, but they're always really small. This one is huge because it's in big cities. All of the others were in little villages.
I see.
When
and there's no
people together, the more people are going to get sick.
Yeah, and there's no cure for this.
No.
Now, why did you write your book on this subject? Because it obviously it caught your interest on something in particular about what this thing is. As a matter of fact, Sharon, do you call it the blood serpent, or is that a term that has been given to it? How did the term blood serpent be associated with Ebola?
Well, scientists who follow and study Ebola have called it snakes for a long time. When they see the virus under their microscope, they will often shout out, "We've got snakes," or "We've got worms," "We've got ropes," because they look like that. They look like twisted rope or snakes curling in on itself. Marburg tends to be more linear with a little round, what's called a Cheerio at the end, but it also can sometimes look like a twisty snake.
And that's what's on the front cover of your book. That's
the actual virus particle. Yeah.
Wow.
And I call it a blood serpent because it seems to make the body issue forth all sorts of blood, which traditionally has been an occult signal, because if you look into the history of the supernatural realm, there's a strong desire for the shedding of blood.
Huh. So how do you get an Ebola? Is it through contact? Is it through air? Respiratory droplets? How does this transmit?
All the above.
Really? It goes through the air?
It can go through the air on droplets. There's a big difference between being carried on an air current and being expelled from someone's mouth in droplets.
Right.
And the same drops of saliva can have, hundreds of thousands of virus particles just as well as a drop of blood. And if I were to sneeze into your face, you might get it because it would go into your nose, your mouth, your eyes. And it might be just enough to catch in your body, and suddenly you have Ebola too. That's why if you work with Ebola patients, you should wear a mask of some kind. They have those plastic shields, or actually the hood is usually what they pull over their heads, over top of their PPEs.
One of the things that disturbed us during the height of the outbreak, which back in October we talked about on our program PID Radio, was that the federal government was telling people that you had to come into contact with fluid.
Exactly. They kept saying, "Oh, no. If somebody sneezes, you can't catch it that way."
Yeah, and the head of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy, or CIDRAP, gave a public statement.
Michael Osterholm.
Yes, in which he said, "No, that's not exactly correct." He gave a talk that was recorded and played on C-SPAN, so of course nobody saw it.
Except me.
Yeah,
I watched
except Sharon. It said that the current virus may be more likely to spread through aerosols, through the air, than strains they'd previously encountered. But his point was that if somebody sneezes, you're not actually sneezing an aerosolized virus. You're sneezing little water droplets, and of course those are bodily fluids, and those come into contact with, say, the handle on the bus seat that you may grab as you stand up or sit down. So, in effect, the information that was being given out by the government was absolutely 180 degrees wrong. You didn't have to come into physical contact with blood or other bodily fluids from someone infected.
And you can catch it from a surface, which they finally admitted.
Yeah. Exactly. And that was the second part of the point there. You could inhale the aerosolized droplets of somebody sneezing. And of course, if you touched a surface on which someone had sneezed.
If it had not been cleaned and sterilized.
If it hadn't been cleaned and sterilized. Or somebody who had sweated, the virus out. So, it was more infectious than we were being told.
And if you are, quote unquote, cured of Ebola, in other words, you survive the disease, you are infectious via sex. Let's just put it that way. You can excrete the virus in your semen or vaginal secretions for 6 months.
Oh, for 6 months. Oh, my goodness.
6 months.
That doesn't surprise me that the government was wrong on this. Because actually, we don't really know that much about Ebola. I mean, it's not like, polio that they've known something for a long time and virtually eradicated polio. This disease, this virus is relatively new. And
they're relatively new to humans, but the theory is that the virus actually is really, really old, as in hundreds of thousands of years old, if you go by old Earth numbers.
Right.
But at the very least, it goes back to the dawn of time, whenever that is.
Well, so this has been around, but it's never contaminated humans before up until 1976 that's been documented.
Well, there's a theory that the Black Plague was actually a hemorrhagic fever virus.
Oh, very interesting.
And even before that, was it the Trojans or the Greeks who had a big plague?
The ancient Greeks had a plague, and I'm gonna have to go back. Well, I'm gonna have to go back and read your book again.
It's been a while since I wrote it.
Yeah.
I wrote that book very, very quickly, and one of the reasons that I did so, there are some people who say, "Oh, you just wanted to capitalize on what was going on in the news," and that isn't true. I just wanted to get the truth out there as quickly as possible because I'd been following Ebola for about 10 years.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, exactly. When I first read, the book Hot Zone.
Yeah, Richard Preston. Yeah.
Which I just suddenly thought, this is crazy. Where have I not heard about this virus? And from that point on, I started really kind of watching as the internet evolved and grew more populated with information. I kept that on my radar via Google email alerts. So anytime there was an Ebola story, Google would send me a little note.
Right.
Yeah, the plague of Athens in 430 BC, believe it or not.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, this was during the, just a brief history lesson, during the Peloponnesian War, when Athens was at war with Sparta.
We are Sparta!
Yeah. But there's some speculation that Ebola was actually the cause.
Well, wow, that is very interesting. I liked the out of the box, ideas about this because, this just didn't come out of thin air in 1976, and the fact that the government really didn't know all that much about it, but makes it sound like that they do is not that surprising at all.
Very comforting, is it? And when you take a look at what was going on in West Africa, now, mind you, I am not saying this is how it happened, but there were laboratories operating in Liberia and in Sierra Leone several years before the outbreak began in West Africa. And they were studying, this was Emory University working with the NIH, I think.
Yeah.
And there may have been a third partner, maybe a drug company, but they were taking a look at Lassa virus, which is a hemorrhagic fever virus. It's not in the family with Ebola and Marburg. It's a different family of viruses, but it has a blood component to it too. And they were taking a look at ways to prevent that. But at the same time, in their labs, they were studying Ebola. That's on record. So when the outbreak began in West Africa, one of the first things that the leaders of those countries did in Liberia and Sierra Leone is they said, shut down those labs now.
Wow.
Yeah, long history of distrust between people in Africa and health workers, especially health workers coming from foreign nations.
Well, in fact, there were several priests who were beaten up just last week because they went in to spray for mosquitoes, I think.
And what happened?
Well, they went into, was it Guinea, I think? They went into spray for mosquitoes, and they were beaten up by local villagers.
Because they thought they were spreading disease?
They were spreading disease, exactly. There is a presumption that, and that's one reason that it's been really difficult for the World Health Organization to say here what the numbers are, because a lot of the villagers, they don't want to go to the hospitals because they believe that's where it's spread. So if they start feeling sick, they're not going to go, and they don't want their family to go.
Wow, there's a whole perception there that has to be overcome. It's true in America when you go to the hospital and you go in for one reason and then you all of a sudden have a secondary infection. Mm-hmm. That's called a nosocomial infection. That's an infection acquired while you're at the hospital that you picked up at the hospital. And that can, now you got your problem, plus you got another secondary infection. And so when you populate people either in hospitals or villages or whatever, it doesn't really matter because, you have a mass population that disease can go to. And I always wondered how they being the government, could be so confident that it wasn't spread by respiratory droplets or by surface, because a lot of these healthcare workers, professionals, were donning mask gloves and doing everything that they do. Yet we know of several nurses and two of the doctors that came down with this.
Yeah, those are just ones that we know about. There have been a lot of doctors who have died, doctors from Liberia and Sierra Leone and Guinea, who have given their lives by trying to help others live. And they were wearing personal protective equipment. They were wearing the PPEs that they were told to don. And I think that it's more than, and in fact, the nurse from Scotland who got sick, you remember that story that was in the news a couple of weeks ago?
Yes.
McCary or something anyway, sorry, I butcher her name, but she is now well, praise the Lord. And she got it because they all went to church before they flew home. And when they were in church, they were hugging the villagers to say goodbye.
Oh, goodness. And she picked it up that way. Why
and she wasn't. I'm betting that the villagers were not bleeding on her.
Right. Well, obviously, she wouldn't be hugging them. If that was the case, I was invited by one of the men in my prominent community, one of the prominent men in my community, to go to Sierra Leone. This was going to be his third trip over, and he was taking a group of people with him. And this was last summer, right before the big outbreak. Yeah. And matter of fact, the travel restrictions weren't even in place, and it hadn't even hit Sierra Leone yet. So, but the word
wasn't in the news yet. Yeah,
it just wasn't in the news.
Well, correct, and I ended up not going, a number of reasons, but when they got back from Sierra Leone, that whole thing swept through the village they were in days after they left, and people that they had visited with and seen in the village for the time they were there, within a matter of days, when the epidemic came through, died. Oh. They got out just within days. And of course, they didn't get any infections, but they were very, very close to that, doing missionary work over there. And wow, what a
Well, please thank your friend on our behalf, because, the people who go to the front lines on the mission field, whether they're serving there as a medical person or in any capacity, this is incredible. I have so much admiration for people like that. And, it was cool that you wanted to go.
Well, people need to understand that there are things that we need to reach out too, and people, people go to these places and they do these things, and they're on the front lines, and what an amazing thing that they do for doing that. They're giving back to give life to others. We're going to stop for the break here. We're going to be back right after a short break here on Epic Voyages Radio. So don't go anywhere, because we're going to talk about how this all ties in with the fourth horseman of the apocalypse. Stay right there. We'll be right back here.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best.
Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Just a reminder that Inception Radio Network is on Twitter. Follow us at I_R_N and keep up to date about who's on tonight, what interviews they'll be doing, who's guest spotting, what topics they'll be covering. Tweet to us, tweet about us, retweet topics to your friends, and most importantly, never miss a great show again. That's I_R_N. Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Remember, you can take your Inception Radio shows on the go. Just download the Inception Radio Network app for your iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones and access live shows, past shows, guest lineups, and much more. Just visit the iTunes Store or the Google Play Marketplace and download it today for free. Psst, are you looking for a cure for boredom? Never worry. IRN's new interactive website introduces a number of ways to pass time while you listen to your favorite show. Choose anything from the IRN Chat Lounge, the Game Lounge, Video Lounge, or the Mood Lounge. These fun, exciting features let you chat in real time with fellow listeners, view live skywatches, play daily posted online games, or pick a show based on topic. The choices are endless. Use your time wisely, keeping it all on IRN.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
Man vs. Archaeology with Aaron Judkins. It's about digging up the past, exposing forbidden archaeology, and discovering our hidden history. What are these mysteries of our past, and why are they important to our future? Learn more at aaronjudkins.com.
EPIC is Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council, the forum for scholars, experts, and those fascinated by and involved in the study of ancient civilizations, conspiracies, cryptozoology, ETs, and UFOs, fringe science, the paranormal, and all manner of extraordinary phenomena. Please join EPIC as we examine the mysteries of the world and beyond on epicvoyagers.com. And for updates on the upcoming interactive video presentations, the latest news and discussion on the EPIC forums, as well as research, investigations, and membership opportunities. Epic Voyages program schedule is on the Inception Radio Network. Thank you for joining us.
And welcome back here to Epic Voyages Radio. I am your host, Maverick. For tonight's show, with our special guest, Sharon Gilbert, and her husband, Derek Gilbert, author of Ebola and the Fourth Horseman of the Apocalypse. What a interesting title of this book. If you have not checked out Sharon's website, you need to go over to SharonKGilbert.com, SharonKGilbert.com, or go to www.gilberthouse.org. Make sure you check out that book. It is really a fascinating fascinating topic here. Ebola and the fourth horseman of the apocalypse. Okay, so guys, we were talking about Ebola and what all this stuff is, and why this is important to us, because obviously this is a very deadly virus. We all know that from 2014, how deadly this thing can be. And we talked about why you call it the blood serpent because of how it looks. It looks like, serpents or worms that are kind of folded, around itself. And it's I can see that from the cover of your book now, looking at that. And again, the book cover is tremendous. And I know that the content is fabulous because of your knowledge on this subject. I want to be able to understand why Ebola, all of a sudden we're hearing about Ebola. And I think it's quite interesting when we look at the history that you gave about these other plagues, that it could have been Ebola. We just don't know, but it's quite interesting. Why do you call the virus a biological machine? What is that about?
Well, but viruses are really interesting things, and I'll call them a thing because, they're not alive and they're not dead. They're not a biological form in the way that a bacterium is. A virus is more like nanotechnology. And its only purpose is to infect your cell and make copies of itself. And then to find another cell and make that cell make copies of itself. It doesn't ingest you. It doesn't use you for food. It's not alive. And yet it propagates. It really is like current nanotechnology. And because I study Bible prophecy, I believe that if you take a look at the book of Genesis, and you've talked about this, I'm sure, in Genesis 6, it talks about how the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and there were giants in the land. This is a telling of a story where we see it in a lot of mythologies, stories of supernatural beings that mate with human women and produce these demigods, these, like Hercules and name some more.
The Nephilim.
Apollo and they're called the Nephilim, exactly, in Hebrew. And these entities were selling, and the fallen angels that were doing the copulating with the men, they were with the men, but they were breeding with the women. They were selling knowledge for favors. And some of the knowledge, I believe, may have been early nanotechnology, because what's really new and exciting and seems like the coolest kind of science that they never would have thought of back in the old Bible days, well, honestly, that's been around for as long as the world's been around, because the supernatural realm has secrets that we've not yet unlocked. So I believe that these are leftover machines, biological machines that were intended to alter human DNA, which they do. Viruses oftentimes will alter our DNA, and they will shut off genes, they will turn on genes, they will insert pieces of themselves into our genes, and some of those cause cancer. Some of those cause other diseases.
Does that replicate the RNA and then inject itself into a healthy cell, and then turns that cell into a duplicate copy of itself?
Sometimes that's how it works. That you're describing retrovirus, and that's how those work. They're like little syringes that inject little bits of RNA and other proteins in there to force your body, your cells to be little copy machines.
Right. I know HIV is a retrograde virus. Is Ebola retrograde as well?
But it is an RNA virus. And there are only 7 genes in that little bitty thing. 7 little genes. Can you imagine that? 7 genes. That's it. And it manages to do the destruction. It just totally destroys the human body.
Right. And it does it very quickly, too. That has got to be... going at lightning speed at the cellular level. I saw a thing that Harvard produced a couple of years ago. Their graduate students did a 3D graphic of what it looks like on the inside of your cell. And they did this whole animation of the inside of a cell. And they take you in through the 3D world of this, where you're just kind of zooming past Golgi bodies and all these things that are happening in the cell. And it is stunning. It's stunning what is happening in there, because everything is interconnected in that cell. It's like a precision watch.
It's like a little city, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Everything has this intricate detail. They get specific jobs that they do, and if you remove one of those components out of the cell, the whole thing dies. Mm-hmm. You can't have one thing only. It has to be every intricate part working together in symphony for the thing to continue to be alive. And when I saw that, I was just fascinated with the little world in the cell that's going on in the some trillion cells in your body that we have. And to think that these viruses are going in, and it's like the Borg of the Star Trek, isn't it?
Yeah.
You will be assimilated, because it goes in and just boom. And I mean, it assimilates healthy cells. Okay, so why is this such a concern for us, other than being infectious, and other than people dying in multitudes from this? But how does this tie into prophecy, or does it?
Well, it does, I believe. In the book of Revelation, in chapter 6, we begin seals that are removed from a legal document by Jesus Christ. He opens each seal, and with the first seal, a rider on a white horse is released. On the second seal, a rider on a red horse is released. On the third seal, a rider on a black horse is released. And the fourth seal, we call the fourth horseman of the apocalypse. He's on this sort of sickly green horse and he's not alone. And he is the only rider given a name. The other three riders, you don't know what their names are. But that fourth rider, you're told his name, and it's Thanatos. Thanatos is the son of Nyx, the son of night, and Uranus, the sky. And he has a twin brother named Hypnos, and the two of them work for the guy that's riding with him, Hades, hell. These two guys bring people who have passed away either through sleep or through a horrifying death to their master, Hades. So this Thanatos, the rider on this sickly green horse, is given permission to kill 25% of humanity. That's why we have to worry about it. Because I believe in Bible prophecy. I believe we're in the last days. And this is a plague that if it's not Ebola, something is coming down the pike.
So the rider of the fourth horse is specifically named. This is in Revelation 6 in Bible prophecy, where the seals are opened and there's riders that are released. There's the four horsemen.
Right. These are supernatural entities. Yeah.
Right. And so the first three get released, but this fourth one is specifically named.
Yeah.
And his job is to spread disease.
His job is to kill 25% of humanity.
Which is going to kill 25% of humanity globally?
Globally. 25% of everybody who's alive at the time this rider gets to start riding is killed with probably a disease, because it's described as therion, which means tiny beasts.
And wow.
The thing, and I had the opportunity to see this presentation when she delivered it in Colorado, and she was concerned with reading her notes and her script, and making sure that the slides advanced properly. I was able to sit in the back of the room and watch the reactions of people as they were listening to her presentation and watching the video on the screen, watching the slides of the presentation. And there were people that were just sitting there with notepads and just scribbling notes as fast as they can. The thing that fascinates me about this is that there are a few places in Scripture, in the Bible, where names that are familiar to anyone who studied any bit of Greek mythology
exactly.
are familiar with. And some of those Greek gods are named by the writers of the New Testament as literal entities. Hades being one.
Okay.
Thanatos being another. Zeus, of course, appears, and we're also told that the king of the entities that come out of the pit in Revelation 9, verse 11, is Apollyon, which is Apollo.
Sure, yeah.
So, again, just fascinating stuff. Now, it could be, you could make a case, I suppose, that the writers of the New Testament were writing things in terms that the Hellenized audience reader would understand, because the Greek influence in that part of the world was extensive. The New Testament was written in Greek. That was like English today. If you wanted to do business around the world, you knew Greek. So the New Testament was written in Greek. But taking it that step further and describing the rider on the horse as a being might just be more than a figure of speech. They could well be referring to literal evil entities,
angels of death,
that will someday ride forth to commit genocide.
And his job is to literally unleash hell on earth.
Exactly.
Thanatos.
Those four riders. I started down this road about a year and a half ago when I decided that I wanted to learn more about the four riders, and I was sort of in my mind thinking I will eventually write a book about this. I'm convinced that the four riders are released to bring about the New World Order that we keep hearing about.
Now, how would that happen, Sharon, in Bible prophecy? So let's say that okay, we're in the Revelation period, okay, and we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to skip all the other stuff, and we're going to go right into Revelation. This thing is happening, and I guess lead us up to the point of the fourth horseman, and what's occurring in Bible prophecy.
Well, the four riders, even though they're released sequentially, they may be boom, 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 boom really quickly. So to us, it would appear to be almost simultaneously. The first rider is the ruler. He is probably the Antichrist because he is riding on a white horse, mimicking the arrival later on of Jesus Christ, who is on a white horse when he comes at the end of the tribulation period. This is beginning of the tribulation period, day one. That rider on the white horse is released with the first seal. The second, and he's given a crown, which means the Lord God Almighty says, okay, you get authority of the earth from now on. But of course, it's only for 7 years. The second rider is on a red horse. This is the God of war. This is the guy who's out there. If you don't follow the new king of the world, I'm going to make you follow the new king of the world. Countries that don't agree with this new worldwide leader, hey, problem solved. I'll go in, we'll start a war, we'll clean it up. The third rider comes in. He is riding on a black horse, and he's bringing in an economic shift to the world. He's carrying a scales with him. It implies not just economy and finances, the trading markets. It also implies a yoke. This is the word that's translated as scales also means yoke. So this is to enslave everybody in an economic system. The New World Order set forth by these first three riders. And what's the result of it? If you don't follow the New World Order, you die. And if you do follow the New World Order, you might die then too. Because if you follow conspiracy theories at all, and that's one of the reasons that Derek and I do our podcast, PID Radio, which stands for Peering into Darkness, which essentially means we're looking at the enemy and trying to figure out what's going on, right? We're spies. If you look at the conspiracy theories that are out there about the New World Order, one of the main tenets of it is to reduce the world population to a more manageable size, but they want to take it down by 90%.
Oh.
They want to reduce it down to 10% of what it currently is.
Okay, that reminds me of the Georgia what is that? The Georgia
Guidestones.
Guidestones, yes. And on that, they have all these things. I've never been there, but I understand they had a population given of some, what was it?
Reduce the world population by 90% is what it says.
It's a little difficult for us to get an idea of how massive this is going to be. I was just doing some research here on something Sharon studied, and in fact, some of this research that she's done has kind of informed the book on Ebola that she's written. The 1918 Spanish flu pandemic killed between 50 and 100 million people, depending on because in certain places of the world, because of World War I, they weren't able to get accurate statistics. It's estimated that 500 million people of the world were infected. So you've got a mortality rate of 10 to 20% on this. But Ebola, the mortality rate runs as high as 75 to 90%.
Well, if you read the official reports of the Spanish flu, they will say that it was about 5%.
And
worldwide.
Yeah,
now,
5%.
Take 5% and multiply it by 5, because 25% of the world is going to die when rider number 4 hits.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to say. 3 to 5% of the world's population actually died from this. Yeah, and at that time, that was considered horrific. My grandfather wrote a number of letters home, which I have copies of, and he signed all of them. I am feeling fine and in the best of health. Your loving son. And wondered, that's kind of an odd way to close a letter, even at that period of time where things would say, your humble and obedient servant. Well, okay, by the turn of the 20th century,
right,
guys like my grandfather weren't signing letters like that. But I couldn't figure out why. I am feeling fine in the best of health. Every letter. And then I realized he was off in France at the time the Spanish flu was rampaging around the world. So 5% of the world, one of the deadliest natural disasters in all of history. Yeah, like Sharon said, multiply that by a factor of 5. And that's what this writer is going to have permission to do. Now, interestingly, isn't it interesting, though, that those who behind the Georgia Guidestones and those world elites who are convinced there are just too many useless eaters here want to take that 25% permission that will be granted to the writer on the pale horse
and scale it up,
and they want to scale it up to 90%. Yeah.
Well, and it makes you wonder the motive behind that. I wonder if there's an orchestrated event with, behind the scenes developing the New World Order. I know we've heard about this for years, and not that they're trying to fulfill Bible prophecy by any means, but it sure is interesting how these things that we see that have come to pass in the past, and that we see currently, and the things that are yet to come in the future, how it really dovetails in to what's happening with the New World Order.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of things going on out there. And as I say, Ebola may not be the pandemic that actually takes out 25% of the world. For instance, take a look at the influenza virus that's been going around the last 4 or 5 months. It's H3N2. It's a seasonal virus. But we've had a major problem with people who were vaccinated still getting sick. And in fact, some I think it's like 45, 46 kids have died from this. It's choking the hospitals. They don't know what to do with it. The CDC has announced, look, we know that we planned the virus, which is, it's a trivalent virus, so it's protecting you against 2 types of influenza A and 1 type of B. And the influenza A that everybody's getting, it's radically, it's 45% different from the one that we made it, plan to make it fun. I mean, they're just stumbling over themselves. But at the same time, at the end of this major conference, they say, but go out and get your flu shots anyway. Mm-hmm. It won't help, but go get it anyway.
Well, I know in my area that the flu shot was not effective because it was just the wrong strain. I know they tried to predict.
That's what they're saying. But if you really read what they've written, it's the right strain, but they said it's undergone what they're calling antigenic drift. They're wrong. If it's moved that quickly to a 45% difference, it's a little faster than drift. It may even be antigenic shift, which is a really quick change in the how a virus is laid out. This is a virus that, if it continues to mutate, could become really problematic. So, it can turn on a dime that quickly.
Well,
something that we're all familiar with can suddenly either reemerge or become really, really, infective and dangerous.
And you're talking mutational shifts. Let's hope it doesn't become another Spanish influenza pandemic.
Exactly. The interesting thing about Spanish flu, I don't know how much you have read about that, but that also had a hemorrhagic component. Because if you read the notes of the doctors from the time period, very often they're describing a bloody effluent in the lungs, that it's almost like the lungs were bleeding out.
Have you heard, and Derek, you too, a book I read years ago called, it was called Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. Have you read that?
You know what? I think did I read that? I remember downloading it. I found it online somewhere.
I think it was from back in the early 90s. William Cooper, I think, was a former naval intelligence guy.
Yeah.
And he had some inside information, and he wrote a book called Behold a Pale Horse. And I think he even said, look, if something happens to me, that I didn't die of natural causes. And, and I understand that he died kind of mysteriously. But in his book, he talks about the New World Order and how all these events are coming to pass.
Yeah.
Within the circles, in the shadows of the government.
Didn't he die in a shootout with the police?
I don't.
That's the guy I'm thinking of. Let me see.
I don't know how he died. I'm really not sure. But he was a big proponent of the New World Order, of at least being outspoken against it, and bringing to light the subject of this is what's happening, at least with his inner circles that he was involved in. And I've got that book somewhere in my library. I need to pull it out and read it along with yours, because things have happened now since 91 that's really come a lot further than that. Do you think, just in the next minute, do you think we have really advanced in that cause of the New World Order?
In other words, do I think that it could happen any minute, the seals opening up?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I think we're really close to that. I think the New World Order has changed a lot. If you take a look at geopolitics, since 9/11, the world has radically changed. I mean, radically changed. The push to democratize other nations in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East and in South America. This is something our country is doing, whether the American citizen is aware of it or not. And it's done all under the guise of, we've got to protect the world. For instance, in Ukraine, we are installing anti-missile batteries that are pointed toward Russia. Imagine that. And we have a massive civil war taking place in Ukraine. Russia wants it. Ukrainians want it for themselves, and I think they'd like for everybody to get out. And we want it. And Ukraine at one time, and it's even, if you look at the news, you'll see that Russia is sort of holding Europe hostage over it, saying, okay, we're not going to run our Gazprom gas through there anymore. Sorry, we're just going to send it down through Turkey now because they're playing ball. There are so many things going on in the world that I think could very quickly, if a world leader emerged, if rider number one came on the scene with answers to all the problems, many people in the world would just go, finally. And they'd actually may even say, hey, you know what? Jesus Christ finally made it back.
Sharon, hold it right there. We're at the top of the hour. We're going to go to break, so stay tuned. We'll be back with Sharon, Gilbert, and the Ebola and the fourth horseman of the apocalypse right here on Epic Voyages.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app, you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Just a reminder that Inception Radio Network is on Twitter. Follow us at I_R_N and keep up to date about who's on tonight, what interviews they'll be doing, who's guest spotting, what topics they'll be covering. Tweet to us, tweet about us, retweet topics to your friends, and most importantly, never miss a great show again. That's I_R_N.
Turtle engine going. Boy, do I have a perfect place for you. MJ'sHealthyWay.com. They offer the best service and products, and they'll tell you anything you need to know about any product they have to offer. I get all my vitamins, meal replacements, shakes from MJ'sHealthyWay.com. That's spelled MJSHealthyWay.com. There's so much more at the website. Go check it out. MJ'sHealthyWay.com.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. Would you like your favorite show to be played live on air? Well, now the choice is in your hands with IRN's Live Request Portal, an easy way to request your favorite show with a simple click. IRN's Live Request Portal now gives you exclusive access to all the shows. How easy is it? Simply type a show name or a guest name, click request, and even write a dedication message. That's it. Try it now. Simply visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com, click on the Live Request tab under the show menu. Playing your favorite show is just a mouse click away.
Man vs. Archaeology with Aaron Judkins. It's about digging up the past, exposing forbidden archaeology, and discovering our hidden history. What are these mysteries of our past, and why are they important to our future? Learn more at aaronjudkins.com.
Howdy, this is Joe Mars. I'm inviting you to tune in to Epic Voyages, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday nights, right here on Inception Radio Network. To find out more about Epic and how you can become a member, visit epicvoyagers.com. That's EPICVOYAGERS.com.
Welcome back to Epic Voyages Radio. I am your host, Maverick, for tonight's show with my special guests, Sharon and Derek Gilbert, on Ebola and the fourth horseman of the apocalypse. We have been talking this last hour about Ebola and now about the fourth horseman of Revelation 6 and how this thing's going to roll out and how the New World Order plays into all this. Very fascinating. Let me ask you, we've been talking about the fourth horseman. Do you think the other three horsemen have started to ride yet? I know this is in a spiritual context regarding, Bible prophecy, but do you think those first three have gone out yet?
Well, before I answer that, let me make sure that everybody listening right now, if you're in front of a computer, go to facebook.com/findingnoahfilm and like that page.
Oh, she's good. She's very good.
Because I'm not going to tell you to you go and like the page. Okay, now that you've been there and liked the page. Actually, there are some people who believe that the writers began writing in the 1st century. Now, I can tell you why they believe that. And one of the reasons is that when John, who writes the book, John, the Apostle John, he is on the Isle of Patmos, and he's very elderly. He's survived being boiled alive. He's just barely hanging on. He's in his 80s, I think. And he is called to heaven. He sees a vision on earth, and then he is called to heaven. And standing in heaven, before the throne of God, he sees a being who is described looking very much like Jesus Christ, who looks like a lamb who has been slain. And there's a scroll that's been presented, and everyone asks, well, nobody is, nobody can open this scroll because nobody has the authority to do so. And this lamb appears, and he is the only one. So we have this song, this wonderful song of Worthy is the Lamb. Well, there are some who believe that because we see this vision of Jesus Christ, who appears to have just ascended to the throne, which took place, after the resurrection, well after the resurrection, 40 days?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That he has just seemingly arrived, that the riders that are sent forth when he begins to open this scroll, unsealing them, breaking the seals, that those riders began their ride in the first century. I can understand the reasoning for that. But when you talk about God's view of time, it's always now. God is always now. That's why he's called the great I am, present tense. Alpha and Omega, it's all the same to him. He is outside of our time-space continuum. We're locked into time, into what we perceive as a line. It's all now to him. So, you can't necessarily say because he appears to have arrived in the first century AD that to the throne of God, it was the first century AD here on earth. Mm-hmm. There are others who say that the riders began their ride in the 20th century, in the turn of the 20th century, early 1900s. That at the time that World War I started, Spanish flu, World War I, Russian Revolution, that this major upheaval in geopolitics and releasing of deadly diseases like smallpox and polio and the Spanish flu, of course, that we talked about, and other kinds of swine flu that came about in the later years, that these were actually indications that it began in the 20th century. I honestly don't know 100% which of those is the correct interpretation. I lean toward the belief that they have not yet begun to ride. I pray they are not riding yet, because in my understanding of how to discern those scriptures, it is a future event for me.
And a lot of things would already be happening, I think, before those riders are loosed.
Well, exactly,
that we would see.
But Jesus Christ, when he's asked, how will we know that the end of the age is here? Well, the end of the age is when Jesus comes back. It's when everything turns and the end of the epic. The disciples were asking, when does this world cease to belong to the enemy and you come and you reign here on earth? They'd gotten enough of what he was teaching that they knew to ask the question. Right. The answer he gave was, well, you know what? There are going to be a lot of signs, and you can watch for these. There's not one sign, but there are a lot of that will give you a clue that you're in that season in the last days. And he said these signs will increase and become more frequent as you get closer to the actual event. He compared it to birth pangs. And in my book, I talk about how if you've ever had a loved one who's loved one who's born a baby, or ladies out there, if you've ever had your child, you know that sometimes when you get close to that due date, you get these contractions that feel for all the world like it's the baby's here any minute. And you get to the hospital and the doctor just looks at you and says, oh, those are Braxton Hicks. No baby yet. Go home.
Right.
And you don't have a baby for another 5 or 6 weeks. But Braxton Hicks start hitting sometimes 6-7 weeks before the baby actually arrives. I think that what we're seeing now with an increase in earthquakes, the geopolitical upheaval, the pandemics that are starting to hit, more and more news of this wave of economic woe, and that what appear to be future echoes of the riders, I think these are Braxton Hicks, and they're getting closer together, and they're getting harder.
Interesting, and that may explain what we're seeing with the outbreak back in 2014. And it just seems like, you hear this and this thing comes along, and, I certainly wasn't keeping up with Ebola before 2014 like you were, Sharon, but you knew about this and it was on your radar, and you had been, watching for these signs for the last 10 years, where I haven't been. My focus has maybe been, in other things, but it takes people like you and Derek to capture what's going on in the present and sound the alarm and be the watchman on the wall and say, hey, this is what we're seeing. And I'm so glad that you put all this together and wrote your book on this, because we need to have answers and why this dovetails in with what's happening with what we're seeing with the New World Order. Now, I know that a lot of people say, well, that's a conspiracy. But yet we see things, I think, in everyday life that points to that something is coming that is beyond our grasp. And I think when it hits, we're going to know it. Let me give out the phone number real quick before I forget. It's 1-888-919-2355. 1-888-919-2355. Call in. We have this hour with Sharon, Gilbert, and Derek, and we are going to be taking your calls for both of them on Ebola, on the Fourth Horseman, Revelation, the Apocalypse, the New World Order, any and all. This is your chance to call in for our special guest tonight, 1-888-919-2355. Okay, so if you call in, we'll get you on the air, or you can go to the chat room at InceptionRadioNetwork.com, and we'll get your question on the air. So it's very interesting because we see that this thing is happening. And we talked about the other horsemen could probably have ridden, but we just don't know yet for sure. Do you think it's possible that we're going to actually see Sharon, the Antichrist, come on the scene?
I believe that he is alive now. I believe he will emerge in my lifetime. We're told in the Bible that depending on how you translate the word apostasia, that we either are going to recognize him or he will be revealed right after we leave. And I'm going to let Derek expand on that.
Okay, please.
There are differences of opinion about the translation of certain verses. And I just as an overview, let me say that I think this is a topic that is deliberately somewhat vague. Mm-hmm. God knew that a third of the angels rebelled against him. We know that from the book of Revelation. Satan convinced a third of the angels to join him in a rebellion against God and those who remain faithful to him. God inspired humans through the work of the Holy Spirit to write the 66 books of the Bible, 40 different authors who were spread over, 1,500 years of time between the time of Moses and the first century authors?
Well, if you count Job, it's even longer.
Yeah. So anywhere, 1,500, 2,000 years, somewhere in there, into the books that have been collected together under the title of the Bible. And the enemy, and by that I capital E enemy, the fallen angels who rebelled, know Scripture a lot better than you, me, or the most learned scholar who has studied it, because they've had a lot more time to do it, and besides, they're supernatural. So I think that God, in his wisdom, made things somewhat difficult to understand for us, so that the enemy wouldn't be able to fabricate. I mean, if it was so clear we could understand it perfectly, the enemy would be able to come up with a wonderful lie, a fabrication that would be so convincing we would all be fooled. So there have been arguments about prophecy that are going on for 2,000 years. And even to this day, there's no faster way to get a bunch of otherwise mild-mannered Christians to argue than to just say, okay, pre, mid, or post, referring to the timing of the rapture, a belief that Christians will be called out.
And not all believe in the rapture. So.
And not all believe in the rapture. There are many denominations, Roman Catholicism for one, Lutheran denominations that are amillennial. They don't believe that Jesus will literally come back to reign for 1,000 years over the earth, which, as we do in the pre-tribulation, post, mid, pre-wrath tribulation, is another belief that is theory that is gaining some traction these days. And I've been saying all this to stall while I open up the Bible and got the right verse out here. 2 Thessalonians 2:3, a verse that is pointed to by those who say that we are going to be out of here before the Antichrist arrives on the scene. Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come, meaning the day of the rapture, when we're all called
Day
out
one
of
of the tribulation
Right.
period.
Unless the rebellion comes first, and the rebellion meaning a falling away from the teachings of Jesus by people who call themselves Christian, and the man of lawlessness is revealed.
But the word
Antichrist.
translated there is apostasia.
Apostasia, yeah. The word translated into rebellion is apostasia, which is...
It's sometimes just, transliterated as apostasy.
Right. Now, interestingly, the King James Version was the first version, English version of the Bible that translated that word as apostasy. And we understand apostasy to mean today disagreeing with what has been officially taught.
They'll call it a falling away sometimes.
Right. And previous translations of the Bible actually translated that word to mean more like a coming apart or a setting aside or a moving away from.
In other words, it actually means the rapture.
Right. A belief that Jesus will literally, well, anyone who's familiar with the sort of the left behind theology understands what the rapture is. You basically suddenly, boop, gone in the blink of an eye. And obviously there's been a lot of disagreements about that. Again, there are those who believe, and actually that verse is used both ways. Those who believe that the word translated as apostasy or rebellion, that it means the rapture, take that to mean that we'll be out of here before the Antichrist arrives on the scene. There are those who believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, who think we're not going to see the Antichrist, who disagree with translating that word as rebellion or apostasy. And then there are those who think we're going to be here at least for part of the tribulation, who say, see, that day won't come until the man of sin has been revealed.
So it all boils down to, if you have 10 Christians in the same room, you'll have 15 opinions.
Right.
Yes, that's right. You will. You really will, won't you?
Mm-hmm.
What can we do now? Is there anything we can do to stop this? I mean, once this thing hits, is it just going to be? It's just gonna roll right on through. I know the scripture talks about the shadow of death. I wonder if this is going to be one of those things where just when this thing happens and it gets rolled out in full force, there's nothing anyone can do. If you're here experiencing that, is that pretty much true? You
can turn to God, which is why these events are taking place during that. We call it the tribulation period. We call it the tribulation week. What it amounts to is it's 7 years. And during the first 3.5 years, the first half of that 7-year week, called a week because it's just a group of sevens, that period will be essentially the New World Order set up. In the middle of it, this prince, this Antichrist, this king of the world, the first rider, he will present himself as God. And that's what's called the abomination of desolation. That probably will take place in Jerusalem. When that happens, a lot of people in the world will suddenly go, oh my, this was in the Bible. I remember this. And they may, praise the Lord, may turn to him at that time. The first 3.5 years are times of pressure. And only when we humans who want to rely on ourselves and not believe in anything outside of ourselves, we can do it, we're smart, we've got science. Well, those 3.5 years are a wake-up call to those who are still here that you need to turn to God. Once the midpoint comes, there will be a time shortly after that when Scripture says it's closed. That opportunity to accept Christ as your Savior is now gone. And after that, it's just judgment. You want to make that choice before that happens.
And this is all to I guess in the larger perspective, when you're talking about prophecy, this is this is that last week of judgment, that last week of years of judgment on Israel,
right?
And this is to get the nation to repent and wake up and say, hey, this is, the end is imminent. and the end of the age is imminent, and the second advent is about to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
It's sort of the equivalent of coming up and slapping somebody and saying, "Wake up! Don't you understand what you're doing? You're sinking into quicksand."
And there's a pattern of this all through the Bible. You see through the Old Testament that the Hebrews and Israel, then Judah, the chosen people, would consistently get fat and happy and would begin to follow the false gods of their neighbors. And God would use a foreign invader, usually, or some sort of a famine, maybe a drought or something. But often the invasions of their neighbors, Moab or Ammon or Edom or Babylon or Egypt or Assyria or Syria, or somebody would come in from the outside and oppress them, and then they would repent and call out to God, and he would intervene on their behalf, sometimes in a spectacular way. Sometimes he would send a single man as a deliverer, or sometimes a woman as a deliverer, who would lead them to victory over their enemies and give them peace for a while. And then after a while of peace and prosperity, as humans just tend to do, you forget where the good things in your life come from. You think that you created them, that you earned them, that somehow you are responsible for the good things, and you turn away from God. This is a pattern that happens over and over and over in the Old Testament. You just see it, and it's after a while, you read through the Old Testament, and you start to think, why were these people so stupid? Until you look at your own
very
life.
stubborn. Yeah, very,
you look
very
at your
stubborn.
own life and realize, I'm not so very different, am I?
No, we're not.
Modern day America is very much the same way.
Let me ask you this. First, I got a question in the chat room I need to ask, and then I'm going to ask you my question. So here's the question from the chat room. So either one of you. My big question is, why did Jesus say he was here to save and open the door to his Father's world? What was the problem with the souls on earth before?
Well, that's a really, really good question. And it's in the Old Testament, there are people who follow God's commandments through covenants, and the way it's often expressed is that they were looking forward to the salvation of Jesus Christ on the cross by following the models, by trusting in God for the sacrifices that were taking place. Anything they asked him, that he asked the people in the Old Testament to do, they would either say yes or no. If they said yes and trusted in him, and Abraham's a wonderful example. He's listed in the book of Hebrews, which is often called, the 11th chapter of Hebrews is often called the chapter of faith. If you're in there, then you had great faith in the Old Testament. Abraham is in there, and so is Lot, believe it or not. A lot of people might think he's not, but he is. Abraham trusted for that son, even though Abraham was 99 years old when Isaac was finally born. He trusted in him for years and years. He went when God said, "I want you to leave the country." Imagine if God came up to you today and he said, "I want you to move out of Texas. I'm not going to tell you where I want you to go. I'm going to tell you to travel until I tell you to stop."
Just start driving.
Yeah, just start driving. Actually, in fact, just start walking. And you trust in him to provide everything you're going to need along the way. That's a really hard decision to make. Abraham did that. So in the Old Testament, they looked forward to Christ through all of these the imagery that they were given by God, by trusting in him. Those after Jesus Christ, we look back on it, and it's easy for us to see what all that imagery in the Old Testament was about now, because we know that Jesus Christ died once and for all time. Again, God is not subject to space-time continuum. When Jesus Christ paid the price on the cross, it was a cross-dimensional, cross-time, whatever you want to call it. It covered everybody from the dawn of time to the end of time. All they have to do is trust in him. That's it.
So there was the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, which they had to follow that Hebraic law,
that pattern that taught human sin and taught redemption through the shedding of blood.
Yeah. And if you look at the Bible, even all the way back to the garden, the shedding of blood was required to
cover sin.
Because you saw the first thing that God did when Adam and Eve ate from the forbidden tree was he gave them coats of skins to wear. Where did the skins come from?
The innocent animal who was killed.
That's exactly right. Innocent animal that was killed in order to cover their sin. Once Jesus did that on the cross, there was no longer any further need for animal sacrifice. The shedding of blood is no longer required to redeem us from sin. For some reason, that's the way that God created the universe that way. Blood. If you do a word search and use some Bible software, do a word search for blood sometime, going through the Bible, and you see how many times the word blood appears and how often it appears in the context of not shedding it, how important it is not to shed it, and when it must be shed and exactly how it must be shed. Human blood in particular, there's something unique about it. God, in fact, even told Noah that you shall not shed human blood.
And an animal that shed human blood.
For everyone that sheds human blood, even if an animal does it, there will be a reckoning. So even animals that shed human blood, according to God, there would be a reckoning required. Now, you could say, well, it's just saying the sanctity of human life or whatever. Yeah, maybe. But Jesus, who lived perfectly according to the law of Moses, lived a sinless life. And that's, again, you see that many times in the New Testament, particularly in the book of Hebrews. That was why he was able to sacrifice himself for everybody. He fulfilled the law. He was the only one who was able to do it in all of history. So his sacrifice as the perfect lamb who was slain takes away the sins of the world.
And we talk about, these fallen angels that interjected into the affairs of mankind and thwarted the original plan. And then, of course, we know that sin was introduced. But I think the phenomenon is that we have gone from that time to this time, and then the future history that's yet to come. And according to Bible prophecy, this thing has been laid out according to the plan that was established probably from the foundation of the world.
Amen.
And this has really come to pass 100%. And you're saying that this fourth horseman of the apocalypse may be associated with the Ebola virus. Whatever this thing is, it's going to kill 25% of the world's population, and when this thing hits, it's going to be bad. That's why they call it the tribulation. Yeah. it's going to
exactly. Right. There is a pandemic coming one day, and it may be around the corner. And if you're worried about how am I going to survive the pandemic, don't worry about people who can kill the body. Worry about the entities, the choices you make that will result in your soul being destroyed forever.
Well said. Well said. We're going to be at the bottom of the hour here, which means we're going to a break. So this is the last half hour with our special guest, Sharon and Derek Gilbert. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Hello, Inception Radio Network. Would you like your favorite show to be played again live on air? Well, now the choice is in your hands with IRN's live request portal, an easy way to request your favorite show with a simple click. IRN's live request portal now gives you exclusive access to all the shows. How easy is it? Simply type a show name or a guest name, click request, even write a dedication message, and that's it. Try it now. Simply visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com, click on the live request tab under the show menu. Now playing your favorite show is just a mouse click away.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Remember, you can take your Inception Radio shows on the go. Just download the Inception Radio Network app for your iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones and access live shows, past shows, guest lineups, and much more. Just visit the iTunes Store or the Google Play Marketplace and download it today for free.
Hi, can you hear my voice? Imagine how many other people can hear it too. If you have advertising needs, then look no further. The Inception Radio Network currently has openings for on-air advertisements and radio show sponsorships. Given any thought to your target demographic? Inception has you covered there too. Advertising on a network gives you multiple opportunities to advertise on a wide variety of radio show broadcasts, and we have one to fit every advertising need. You know, in recent years, internet radio has exhibited a phenomenal listener growth. An Arbitron Edison survey shows that online radio boosts at least 33 million unique visitors each week and 54 million each month. And that number amazingly continues to grow. And these listeners are a part of many businesses' core demographics. And surveys have shown that internet radio listeners are far more likely than regular radio listeners to spend money on a whole range of activities. You know, internet listeners vote, they dine out and eat fast food, and they grab a cup of coffee. And here's the interesting one. They buy items online at a much higher rate than all other market segments combined. Internet radio also enables businesses to connect with consumers during work hours, where increasingly more lifestyle decisions are being made. Advertise with the best. The Inception Radio Network offers competitive advertising rates to fit just about anyone's advertising budget. Stop by today at www.inceptionradionetwork.com or call us toll-free at 1-888-919-2355. Get the word out. Get results with the Inception Radio Network.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again.
Man vs. Archaeology with Aaron Judkins. It's about digging up the past, exposing forbidden archaeology, and discovering our hidden history. What are these mysteries of our past, and why are they important to our future? Learn more at aaronjudkins.com.
Hello, I'm Pat Ustford, inviting you to tune in to Epic Voyages every Monday evening at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on Inception Radio Network. To find out more about Epic and how you can become a member, visit epicvoyagers.com.
And welcome back here to Epic Voyages Radio. I am your host, Maverick, for tonight's excellent show with my special guest, Sharon and Derek Gilbert, on their book, Ebola and the Fourth Horseman of the Apocalypse.
Well, it is her book. I don't mean to jump in and correct you, but she deserves all the credit. She did all the work.
You're right. It is Sharon's book. Sharon Gilbert, by the way, is a multiple author of many books, and this is one of the latest ones that's just come out, Ebola and the Fourth Horseman of the Apocalypse. Came out November 2014. Make sure you go to her website at sharonkgilbert.com. Okay, by the way, don't forget to go to Facebook and hit the like on Finding Noah. We need 300,000 likes, so I need you to go do that. All right, so we got one last half hour here with Sharon and Derek. We got, I don't know, probably a good 20 minutes in the actual show. So call in with your question, 1-888-919-2355, 1-888-919-2355. And we're talking about Ebola, the Fourth Horseman of the Apocalypse, the New World Order, any and all. Call in with your question. Okay, so what is going on in current events now? Anything with Ebola or anything with epidemics or pandemics regarding any of this? What's happening now?
You know, I am so glad you asked that question because, well, as far as Ebola is concerned, it does seem to be waning in West Africa. It is mutating. And in fact, there was a scientist today, Peter Pio, who is one of the discoverers of Ebola back in 1976. He's on record as saying it's mutating so much, he really worries him. He's afraid that it will become more virulent, it will be more infective, and it could eventually become a major problem in Western nations because of the travel. But I want to talk about something that's not connected to Ebola, but I'm betting many of your listeners have seen the film, either the original film or the remake, The Andromeda Strain. And I bet many of you are out there going, oh, yeah. That is one of the major movies when I was first getting involved in microbiology and molecular biology and really loving all these tiny things. The Andromeda Strain is a story about a space virus that takes over and just kills just about everybody in a small portion in the United States. It's stopped by a secret program that was set up to stop any virus that is so dangerous that it threatens to take out the entire world population. And there's a nuclear bomb in this facility underground where they're studying the virus. That the protocol is that if the virus escapes, they have to nuke the whole site. So there's this interest in the characters and what's going to happen, a lot of dramatic tension. But the whole thing about this space virus, this space seed kind of thing, I found a story today at theexpress.co.uk, and here's the title. Is this picture a seed, quote unquote, seed, sent to Earth by aliens? Scientists discover a mysterious organism. This organism is a teeny weeny globe. It looks like a little tiny Earth. It's just the most interesting thing. It looks like a little bitty frosty white globe. And
it came off of a collar that was around the neck of Frank the dog.
It's smaller than that, though.
Oh, wow.
Here's the thing. Yeah. It's got biological material on the inside of it. It's made of titanium and, oh gosh, what's the other metal that's in there? And I'll find it here in the story in a minute. It's mainly titanium, but inside, biological goo of some kind. And it was brought back to Earth by a project from the University of Birmingham, which sends up balloons into our stratosphere to collect anything that's up there. That's exactly what happened in the Andromeda Strain. They had a satellite up there that was there intentionally. It was a secret project to collect any space viruses, any space bugs that were up there, so they could actually be used for, black ops, secret projects. This was discovered just recently by the Buckingham Center for Astrobiology, and not Birmingham, but Buckingham. And this thing may have, they're testing it, but scientists who believe in panspermia, which is the theory that aliens seeded Earth, believe that this may actually be part of their program, what they call directed panspermia, to take us to the next evolutionary leap in mankind, that these are all over the place and they just happen to catch one. So either it's here to upgrade us or kill us.
Okay, wow. We have a caller on the line, I think, from Michigan, area code 231. Caller, are you on the air?
Yes, I am.
What's your name and where are you calling from?
My name's Sean Carpenter, and I'm calling from northern Michigan.
Okay, Sean, thanks for calling in. What's your question?
Well, see, when I read the book of Revelations, I kind of notice it's suggesting like layers of time, or like, evidently history repeats itself, because we got to keep dealing with this whole thing where people just get out of control and ruin it for everybody pretty much. And that's, what the whole book is kind of about to me. And, I made some connections between when the sixth seal was opened and the blood moon that was in October. And also there was a small earthquake, I think, off of California at that time. And then there's some other reasons why I kind of believe that had happened in October. Kind of really hard for me to prove. I guess you just have to trust me on it. But it appears like we're really having to deal with all this stuff all at once is kind of what it's looking like. And the possibilities of when the next solar eclipse happens on, let's see, March 20th, that may really wake a lot of people up to what's going on here. I think, maybe it might have something to do with the polar flip of the North Pole and South Pole, or I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but there's so much evidence.
Great question.
Sean,
it's a great question.
Sean, that is a wonderful observation. You're a smart man. There is a verse in Joel that talks about how the earth reels like a drunkard.
Isaiah.
Isaiah. That talks about how, like in Joel's the army, that talks about how the earth reels like a drunkard and actually tilts on its axis. And we are seeing the North Pole starting to slip, but we're not seeing it reel like a drunkard. So I think we're, again, seeing sort of future echoes of something that's coming down the pike. And you talked about the blood moon. January 5th of this year was the exact center point of the blood moon tetrad that we've been experiencing over that began in 2014 and is running through the end of the beginning of next year, I think. And it's this very rare event where all of these blood moons happen on Jewish festivals that are very solemn occasions. And January 5th was my husband's birthday. and that fell in the exact middle. And I bring it up because I saw this online, saying, does anybody realize this is in the exact middle? And from January 5th on, it seems like all of these major events are starting to happen in the world. Either they're happening and going faster, or I'm paying more attention to them. I don't know which it is because I can't prove it either way. But I think it's important that people like you, Sean, start to read what's out there, and you need to just seek God's guidance on how to interpret it. Because the most important thing you could do right now is really talk to him, get to know him, and read what's in the Word.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. It's history definitely repeats itself, and these the moon phases we're dealing with are definitely important. I think that's something that really needs to be looked at and paid attention to.
Absolutely, Sean. Thanks for calling in tonight with your questions. Derek, what do you think about these blood moons that Sean was talking about? We got one coming up March 20th. And then we got another one, right, coming down the pike somewhere?
It's a solar eclipse.
The solar eclipse, yeah. I think the blood moons are April and September.
April and September. And there's a solar eclipse in there.
You have to look. Well, I don't know. I'm reserving commitment to it.
This isn't an area that we actually have studied intensively, so,
yeah,
we have friends that really believe in it,
right? And others who say, well, yeah, they occur more frequently than some would like us to believe, or than some make out. Let's put it that way. I'm not saying there isn't significance to it, because the Bible does tell us to look to the heavens. The lights in the skies. The sun, the moon, the stars are there to mark times and seasons, and also for signs.
Exactly.
So there may be some significance to this. But I think, as Sean said, I think the only thing we can really do is wait and see, and try to be prepared is the other thing. And not just, and I'm not talking about hoarding freeze-dried foods, although that's not necessarily a bad idea. I'm saying, you need to be
Krispy Kremes.
Yeah, donuts, and by the way, also toilet paper, which we're convinced will be the coin of the realm when things really hit the
gold,
fan.
nothing. It's going to be toilet paper.
You can't. You can't. Look, gold is fine, but when stuff really hits the fan, guys
soft and fluffy, that's what you want.
Yeah, and guys with bigger guns will be there to take it from you. You can't eat it. You can't use it in any other way. So at that point, it's not really much use. The one thing I would remember about that verse, though, in Revelation, where it says the full moon became like blood, And of course, the sun black as sackcloth, which would be the solar eclipse. But the other part of that verse, which is often not remembered, is that, and the stars of the sky fell to earth.
Exactly. And I think that's what Sean was talking about, the earth moving out of its places. That is happening in a very slow pace.
35 miles a year.
Well, I mean, that's slow. It's not reeling like a drunkard, but it is moving.
Traffic on the freeway in Los Angeles during rush hour.
Right.
It's faster. Yeah, it's faster than...
Well, historically, doesn't these blood moons have something, at least something to do with specifically to Israel? Like something significant happens to Israel, 1948, 1963.
Supposedly prophetically, when it happens in the moon, it reflects on Israel. When it happens in the sun, it's the rest of the nations. So solar eclipses, if something happens during a solar eclipse, it's a judgment on the nations. If something happens in a lunar eclipse, it has to do with Israel. So that's how I understand it.
Yeah.
So the fact that there's going to be a solar eclipse in the middle of these next two blood moons is quite fascinating.
Well, and the solar eclipse falls actually on the vernal equinox, or really close to it. So that's often a pagan holiday. That's a time when, if you look at the supernatural realm, the veil between them is thin. I know everybody's going, what's that mean? I don't know. But I look at the world now. I won't do it. I look at the world in a different way, I think, than many people do. I try to look at what's behind the human perceptions and try to figure out what supernaturally, what spiritually is taking place behind us. Because, Ephesians 6:12 says that we are not wrestling against flesh and blood. Our battle as Christians is against a spiritual enemy. And you have to take that knowledge, know you're on a battlefield to start with, and make sure you have on the helmet of salvation, the gird yourself with righteousness and shod yourself with, I don't have the verse in front of me, but there's equipment that you have to actually put on, and you're given one sword, and it's actually the Word of God. That's your offensive weapon. Some might say it's offensive, but the truth is we're told to stand. Our battle formation is a defensive one, not an offensive one. So we're to defend against a spiritual onslaught. Jesus says that the church is salt and light. We're here to, shed the light of the gospel into dark places. We're here to preserve. Salt has a preserving, a healing quality. And there's a saying that if the salt's still in the shaker, it's not doing anybody any good. So, and Jesus himself said that if the light's under the bushel, if you're hiding it, it's not helping anybody. So we try to live by Ephesians 6 and try to remember that our battle is a spiritual one, and try to shine the light, try to get salt out there, eat a Krispy Kreme now and then.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is shining the light on the perspective from prophecy about how Ebola could be the part of the fourth horseman and that kills us 25% of the world's population. You brought up September 11th, 2001, a little bit ago. Jonathan Cahn, I think he's the rabbi who first broke the story behind the judgments regarding
the Harbinger.
The Harbinger, yes, thank you. Those harbingers that came down. I guess you're familiar with that, and how all that interconnected with September 11th. And when I heard that for the first time, I thought, well, I'm not too sure about it. But when I began to see the connections with the harbingers, then it really became perplexing for me, because it's beyond any one person's ability to put all that together. What do you know about the harbingers? Do you think that was part of judgment that was coming in on the nation, and do you think there's going to be other harbingers coming down the pike?
I think the 9/11 event had a lot of occult signatures in it, showing that this was an event that was orchestrated within the spiritual realm and felt, and the consequence was in our physical realm. I think it was a clue to those who are paying attention that we are just really close to that writer, number one, writing out. And it's time to, the old saying, get right with God. Used to drive down the road back when I was a kid, and you'd see all these signs, and it'd say, get right with God, and perma-shave at the end. But it is time to figure out, okay, what is my relationship with God? Because you know what? Not one of us has tomorrow promised. Derek and I may be in a car crash tomorrow. Our house may be hit by a plane. I may suddenly get sick. I may have a heart attack, drop, and die. You don't know that you have tomorrow, but you have now. Right. So use now to get to know God. Use now to talk to him. Use now to ask him, if you're real, show me. He will. He will answer that.
That's interesting, Sharon, that you said that, because I don't know that I've ever shared this on the air, but when I was, I guess I was 20 or 21, I had the same question lingering in my mind. And for us, here, I guess on planet Earth, there's questions that we have. Who are we? Why am I here? How did I get here? Where am I going with all this? And for me, it began with, what's my purpose? What's my destiny? But even greater than that is this supernatural presence that we call God really real? And for me, that was a question that I had to ask myself, away from home, away from everything that I had been taught in this Western hemisphere of religion. And I had to ask the raw question: do I believe what I believe because of what I've been taught, or do I believe what I believe because it is real? And for me, when I asked that question, for me, it became very real, in the sense that I've got an answer that for me was so tangible that I knew that that was my answer. And so people ask, well, what was that? Well, I came back from a party. My hair was down to my shoulders. Came back from a party, and it was probably, well, it was way past midnight, I can tell you that. And laid down on the bed. And not formally, not anything ritualistic or religiously, I just said, I really need to know if you're real, because if you're not, I'm going to do my own thing, because it's way much funner. And I don't have to worry about, about religion anymore. Or is this thing really real? And I just kind of said it quietly in my mind. And when I opened my eyes, my room lit up with a brilliant white radiant light from floor to ceiling, wall to wall, no shadow, no fear. And it lasted for, I don't know how long, 30 seconds, a minute, I'm not sure. But I sat up on the side of my bed. I said, what was that? And then just quietly on the inside of my heart, there was a response. And it said, you asked me for a sign, and I just gave it to you. Blew me away, blew my mind, blew me away. And so, yes, I think that for me, that was certainly true. And I know that, each person has to search their own soul for that and to have that. We're getting close to the top of the hour, Sharon and Derek. What do you have going on now? Tell us how to get your book and your website.
Well, my website is SharonKGilbert.com. That's Sharon, the letter K, Gilbert.com. SharonKGilbert. We are getting ready, and there's a link there to go buy the book. I'd love it if you buy it, but you know what? I would rather you get to know the Lord. That's what I really want for you. Derek and I are going to be moving very soon to Crane, Missouri to join Tom Horn and Skywatch TV.
And the website there is skywatchtv.com. Should launch this week, but there is already a Facebook page there. You can check out news items, video updates. We're already producing some things, science and news updates on a regular basis from here with
in the temporary bunker.
Yes, the temporary bunker before we relocate to the permanent studio there. Tom is, of course, the man behind Defender Publishing, which has got an excellent roster of authors and some really deep thinkers in the fields of theology, the supernatural realm, and prophecy, and just some great books that have come out of Defender Publishing here in the last the last year or so. The Supernatural Worldview by Chris Putnam, Redeemed Unredeemable by Donna Howell and Tom Horn, the forthcoming Shinar Directive by Dr. Michael Lake,
which I tell you is awesome.
Yeah,
it's a book you're going to want to have.
Antichrist Chronicles by Terry James, and there are others that we can we can name, and some very exciting projects that are coming up in terms of not only books but long form investigative documentary projects. So we're really excited to be a part of this. I'm, a longtime broadcaster, got started in radio in 1980. So now I get to go back after 20 years of toiling in sales to go back to broadcasting, but to do it for something that I think is really important. And so I'm just terrifically excited. So skywatchtv.com.
Thank you guys for being on the show on Epic Voyages. What a fascinating topic. Everybody go get the book, Ebola and the Fourth Horseman of the Apocalypse, Sharon K. Gilbert and Derek Gilbert. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us. We had a great time.
Guys, remember, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Good night from all of us here, my producer, Joe Champion, Ken Cherry from Epic, and Keith Rowland from the Dark Matter Radio Network from the Valley of the Giants. This is Epic Voyages Radio, and until next time, the truth is out there.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's Epic Voyages. I'm Roger Peacock for Epic. Until next time.